All right, we're going to take you on a little journey. It was so perfect that the gentleman before me spoke about pyramids and the value. These are some of the toys that have to do with what I'm going to be talking about, so I can give you a more visual. To start with, I'm going to ask you guys a question. How many of you think with enough emotions, enough intent, enough desire and purpose could create light, like a white light? All right, pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some secrets of how to do this if you don't do it. The thing that inhibits us, what I've found over all my years, and obviously I'm not a kid anymore, is experience seems to be one of our biggest challenges, to get past experience. In other words, if I were to ask you, you didn't raise your hand, can you create white light? And you said no, or I haven't done that. But it's experience that typically tells you about that. So I'm going to share a little story. I'm going to go through it really quickly. This is a story full of miracles. But the reason I want to do this is I want you to understand the psychology of the mind and how important it is in the healing process, the living process, the loving process. I just can't overstate it enough. So, but to start with, I want to introduce my lovely wife and partner, Linda. I've been channeling for about 40 years. This is some of my work here. Linda's been my channeling guide for the last 18 years, and then we became married also. So now she's my lifetime partner. I want to share a little story with you. And this is how psychology works and how important it is that you have to move past the experience that you may not be able to do something because you've never seen it done before. So I'm going to regress back. This was about 15 years ago. I get a phone call late at night from a doctor who knew me in my work. I've been a hands-on healer for, like I said, over 40 years. Reiki master teacher. I did not take the name Reiki. I was born with that name 77 years ago, 20 years before Reiki came to this country. But I am a Reiki master teacher now, and I've initiated about 24 people. So anyway, I get a phone call late at night. It's a doctor friend of mine, and he says, one of my best friends is in the hospital. He was in a terrible accident. It doesn't look like he's going to make it. Would you mind, could you possibly drive to Long Beach? And I was in Temecula in Southern California, about a 45-minute drive. So I said, could you possibly drive down there and administer last rites for him? He's just really close, and somebody, I want you to feel what you feel. So I went there, and first I couldn't get up to critical care, and finally they got past the things that I'm going to administer. I went up and they said, you have to gown up even though you're going to administer the last rites. So I had to do the whole surgeon thing. So I look like a surgeon now. So I go walking over to where he was laying in bed. He had about 30 monitors hooked up above him. His pulse was about 29, blood pressure about 40/30. He was just basically dying. So the doctor very politely comes and takes me by the arm and says, would you like to stand here and administer last rites? And I said, well, I really would like to touch him if it's possible. And the doctor looked at me kind of funny and says, well, whatever. Well, the only place I could get to, because he has all these tubes and stuff running in him, was his feet. So I put my hands on both of his feet. They thought I was trying to help him die, but really I wanted to see if he could respond to anything that I was doing. And we watched his blood pressure start climbing. We watched his pulse start climbing. The two doctors were in a conversation with themselves. They look up at the monitors and what's going on? This doesn't look right. Then they call the nurse over, and the nurse is watching it. So all these three people are watching his whole thing lift up. And I immediately got communication from him. I don't want to die, I want to live. And I said, all right, we'll see what we can do. Now understand, he's in a coma. He's not conscious at all, not able to talk. So I'm going to shorten the story because this is the important part of it. Over the next 2 weeks, everything in his body basically died. His arms, his legs, his lungs, his kidneys, and his complete vegetated state except for his brain. Well, lo and behold, another day later, I get a phone call from his wife and said, Joe's whole respiratory system is crashing, and they couldn't get the halo because he had double broken neck, severed spinal cord. That's how bad this accident was. They said they couldn't find the Allen wrench to get the halo off, to get the ventilator on, because his lungs had just failed. So he went without oxygen to his brain for 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
And the doctors on the thing pronounced him clinically dead. They told his wife he's a vegetable. The only thing that's keeping him alive is the machine, the life support machine, and you really need to unplug him. So she went to her family. They all agreed, unplug him, it's over, and stuff. And she calls me at the last minute. She says, Ricky, they want me to unplug, his name was Joe. They said they want me to unplug Joe. I said, I would like a second opinion from you. And I said, okay, it's gonna take me a little while to get there. So I raced down to the hospital, had to gown up so I looked like my surgeon cell. I went over and he was in a private room. I met his wife before I went in. She was sobbing in tears, thinking it was time to let him go. And I went over and I did the same thing. I put my hands on his feet. And he just almost like screamed at me, please, please, please don't let them take me. Don't let them unplug me. Don't let them kill me. I want to live. I want to live. And so I went out, and it was actually even a little more vocal than that. I went out and told his wife. I said, I'm sorry, but this is what he said. And she immediately said, they said he's brain dead. How could he possibly talk to you? I said, her name was Kirsten. I said, I don't know. But he communicated to me not to unplug him. So she said, I'm going to go with you. So now I'm going to shorten the story up. He was in a coma for 2 solid months. Everything died, including his limbs. Within 2 months' time of him being in that coma, every single thing, I worked on him every single day. I missed 3 days in 2 months, and that's driving 75 miles each way. But I was intent. I had strong intent, strong desire that if he wanted to live that bad, I was going to help him the best that I could. So, long story short, after 2 solid months, his arms and limbs came back to life. His kidneys came back to life, which they said has never happened when the kidneys have been gone. He'd been on dialysis for a month. His kidneys came back to life, his lungs came back to life, and right now he's walking around. He had no brain damage whatsoever. It was just, the reason that I told you the story, okay, so you know what happened. So Joe now, he's up and around. I never got to work on his one arm. One arm is not exactly right, but other than that, he's alive and like well and healthy. But the reason that I told you this story is it challenged some people's realities, some doctors and some nurses that watched this happen. Like when I said, I'm going to work on his kidneys tonight, because he typically would have a staph infection. The nurse I got to be good friends with said, this is the most life-threatening, this is the most well, he finally ran out of most life-threatening things, and he said, where do you want to go with this now? And I said, I want to work on the kidneys and see if we can get rid of that big ugly dialysis machine, because it was always in my way where I went to touch him. And he said, Rakie, his kidneys are not going to come back to life. They don't, not when they've been gone this long. I said, well, it won't hurt to try. Yep, go ahead. So I did what I typically do. I couldn't wait to get back the next day. He was actually waiting for me outside of the critical care room. He said, you're not going to believe this. And I poked my head around the corner and the dialysis machine was gone. He said his kidneys came back to life 2 hours after he left last night.
Wow.
So once again, the reason that I'm sharing this with you is a lot of people saw that. A lot of people saw his limbs come back to life, which was miraculous. They'd been gone for a month. His skin totally got shiny, his toes atrophied over and stuff, and all of a sudden was the magical things that happened. But his toes came back up, all the skin fell off like it had a bad sunburn, and his limbs came back to life. I'm not going to share the details, I don't have time, but nevertheless, several doctors saw that, several therapy people saw it, the nurse especially saw it, so it was witnessed by a lot of people. But the main thing that I told the story for is his wife also witnessed it, and she was able to communicate to his family what was going on. So the reason this is important, she was a professional ski racer, may still be. She hadn't been able to ski all the time he was in the coma because she was going back and forth to the hospital. So she couldn't wait to get out and practice. Well, on her first practice, she had a really bad fall, spiral fracture of everything below the knee. And the doctor who originally sent her called me up and says, Kirsten just broke her leg and it's really bad. They said it may end her racing career. They said she's looking at 6 months healing time. So I said, Dr. Murray, have her call me. So she calls on the phone, go, "Hi, Rakie, I guess you heard the bad news." And I said, "Can you get over here to see me?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, I'm just so depressed. I had a race in 3 weeks, and now obviously that's not going to happen." And she was worried about her standings. I said, "Kirsten, come and see me." "Okay, it's that important." "Yes, it's that important." Now remember, she witnessed all the things with her husband. She saw his lungs come back to life. She saw his limbs come back to life. She saw his kidneys come back to life. So she comes in, full leg cast all the way, even around her waist. And so I worked on her for the first time. She said, "Well, it feels kind of different. I can't tell a lot." But I said, "Okay, I want you to come back again in 3 days." So she came back in 3 days. I worked on her again. She said, "You know what? I can't even feel any pain anymore." I said, "All right, would you come back at the day before the weekend?" I said, "When's your next x-ray due?" And she said, "The first of next week." So she came back on that Friday, and I worked on her one more time. And she said, "I can't feel any pain whatsoever." She said, if I could move, if I didn't have this cast on, I could move my leg. And I said, "Well, give me a call when the x-rays, when they do the x-rays." She calls me up that Monday, said, "Rakie, they did the x-rays, you're not going to believe this." And I said, "What?" She said, "My leg's completely healed." And she was in the race 3 weeks later.
Awesome.
After a spiral fracture. So,
oh, man.
It was an experience that kept that from happening. What if she never would have saw her husband and never saw all the miracles of all his organs come back to life? She wouldn't have had the psychological system that said healing her leg is possible, because the doctor said it's going to take 6 months. That's pretty much what I believe. So the reason that I shared that story with you is I want to challenge what you believe to be possible, and I'm going to show you some things and some work that you can do that literally will change reality. So now on to, well, anyway, this is Metatron's wheel. I might refer to this occasionally. This is a cosmology of reality as it's coming into form. It's actually a sphere, and I'm working on the other side as we speak, but it's 2 years of channeling 12 separate drawings. But occasionally I refer to this because it's so relevant to everything that we do. So, ask another question. How many people in here think, and you can just do this real loosely, how many people think you could build a house without any tools, with no hammer, no saw, none of the tools required? You could build it out of something else, but the thing is we need tools typically to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So as the world turns, and as the world seemed to be getting in a little more delicate position, channeling just broke through one night and said, you need to work with the pyramids. And I'm going, well, how would that look like? There were some things going on that I thought were very relevant that I needed to work on. And they said, "You're familiar with the flower of life?" I said, "Well, of course." They said, "You're familiar with a form called a vesica Pisces?" They said, "If you were to put this is a sacred form. Do most of you know what this is? Or what? It's part of this flower of life. Everything comes through this form, including our own birth. There's nothing that doesn't come through this form. If you get into sacred geometry, all of sacred geometry comes through. This is where it all starts. So it starts with the flower of life and multiple cells, and on and on and on." I says, "Well, that's really good. What am I going to do with that?" And they said, "Well, it has a purpose." He said, "If you can mentally energize it and rotate it at a relatively high speed, it puts out so much energy that it will be detectable and feelable about anything that you've chosen to do that." And I said, by that time in my life, I'd done a lot of remote healing. I lived in California. I had clients in New York that were healed. So it got very apparent to me that distance didn't really matter. In other words, say for instance, if Michael was sitting there and I wanted to heal on him from here, or if he was in New York, it's the same. Distance doesn't really matter. That's something that our mind conceives. It has to do with experience, that you have to travel and things have to travel. Subtle energy, as I know it, and I'm just using that term loosely, has no boundaries, it has no limit, it has no time constraints. The reason that I know that, I get a phone call from San Francisco, and I'm in Southern California, hours and hours away. A mother of a young man, 15-year-old young man, said, "Robert's in the hospital, he's puking his guts out, he's ingested some kind of poison, he was handicapped, they didn't know what he got into, but they said it's super serious, can you help?" So I knew Robert from times that I'd met him, And I went into trance state and immediately started throwing up and heaving my guts out. And 5 minutes later, after I finally got out of the bathroom, she called and said, it stopped spontaneously. 5 minutes ago, it just stopped and never came back. So now I know that distance doesn't really matter. So the reason that I'm getting to that is I'm going to get to the pyramid here pretty quick. What channeling has said when they brought forth this Vesta Pisces, they said if you add one leg to this, in other words, now we have 3 legs. They said the nickname for that they used was a PEDE, P-E-D-E. They said if you add one leg to that and rotate that, that will have everything to do with time. That which is, that which has been, that which is going to be. So if you rotate this becomes a Ferris field. And within that Ferris field, it's actually asking to be activated. And I wasn't sure exactly what that activation means. Channeling is really good about getting you started off in a certain area and stuff like that. But if you're going to make a mistake, they won't jump in and say, hey, don't do that. They'll let you make the mistake, then they'll tell you the right way that you should do it. So I was fascinated by this. There was a situation going on. I don't have time to go into it. That time was very relevant. There were some people communicating with each other that had very ill intent. And I said, can I use this? And by spinning this in a rotation, even in my mind's eye, it literally changed the reality as we knew it. You could say, well, maybe it was a coincidence, but I've had too many miracles for coincidences at this point. So I said, so with 3 legs, it's a tricopede. Can it have more? Can it have 4? And it said, yes. This is called a quadrupede. They said the quadrupede is specific, it has a specific purpose. That's for our Mother Earth, who Shanti was so bless the Mother so much. But anyway, this represents the Mother. So when we spin this, and I haven't gotten to the spinning part yet, but that's also a tricopede on here. But by rotating these, they create a field of energy. And you do this in your mind's eye. I have these examples and these toys to kind of give you an idea of how to do that. So, and I said, what's the purpose in this? Oh, and by the way, this one, the 6-sided one, has everything to do with the sun. So if the sun were having some kind of an issue or something, that's the tool that we'd be using. These are all tools. All they do is they take your intention, your desire, what we talked about earlier, and they intensify it. So now all of a sudden you have something that has capability, but you have the human child, the human creator, working with it, rotating it, and holding the desire of what might happen. So channeling went on to say, well, your planet needs help. It needs light. We're not saying there's anything wrong, but we're telling you that you can do something to help. And I said, what would that be? And they said, you can learn how to work with these peak devices, and you can literally send light to pyramids. And so that started us on this pretty amazing journey that we're still right in the middle of. I want to be clear that when we look out across the world and we choose to initiate some kind of a process that can possibly help in what appears to be an imbalance, we never fall into judgment. We never say, oh, that's terrible, we need to do something about that. But what we do is we create light. And I found that using tools like this, for me, because I'm a very visual person, is the easiest way to create that light. So I built like a little device, which I forgot the blue flashlight. I knew I forgot something. Anyway, get out of the way. I built this little device, and it rotates. I have to control the rotation because it's not that balanced and it might explode. But what it did is I saw this spinning inside of a pyramid, and it helped me to visualize, to create a visualized process that I could create a spinning quadrupede inside of a pyramid. Stop. Thank you. So anyway, the journey began. I said, well, can't do this all by myself. I said, and my wife, but I said, we need help. So we started telling some of our friends about this process, about, can you hold this visualization? And most of them said yes. So channeling has always told me I can tell you what the coherence of the entire planet is. When I speak of coherence, I mean the people that are actually becoming consciousness as opposed to those who are still lost in chaos and violence and whatever. But over the last years, I've always been able to tell the planet coherency right now is 53.8, which is up. That's really perfect. If things like when the pandemic first hit, that whole level dropped down into the 40s, which was the first time I'd ever seen that. But that has changed also.
Do you think that was because of fear? Do you think that was because of fear?
Absolutely. There's nothing that affects coherency more than fear. It's your number one enemy. I know several of the presenters today have posted that up. I think Jacob was one for sure. Yeah, fear compromises your entire system. It compromises your immune system. It compromises your ability. It puts your emotions on edge to where you're more at the edge of your emotions. So in this process, I said, well, there's got to be something we can do as a team. So what Channeling said to do is to pick out 12 pyramids and assign people that want to participate on each pyramid. And what we did is we took readings on all the pyramids, and most of them were at 10% or lower. There was a couple, Giza was different because of there's so much going on there and so many people go there. But I said, all right, well, this will be a good test. We can find out real quick if this works or not. So everybody kind of practiced. I actually made a model with a black background, and this actually starts glowing when it rotates in it. But everybody was able to hold that in their mind's eye, and they said, was it making a difference? So we started doing readings, and my wife started sending those out on a weekly basis, and everybody's getting really excited. So, well, last week it was 22, now it's 28, and it went on and on and on. At one point, right before the pandemic hit, we had every one of those 12 pyramids over 90. Teotihuacan, if I could ever see that right, Teotihuacan. Excuse me if I missed one else. Anyway, that was one of the hardest ones. That one kept drifting down, down, down. We didn't know exactly why, but what we've got is a slideshow to show you the pyramids that we are working on, and hopefully somebody might want to get engaged in that process also. Along with that, first I'm going to go through the pyramids, but I want to show you what this guy is. Looks just like a purple flower base, right? It is. How many of you have had out-of-body experiences in the universe, where you got in the universe? Not too many. Well, when you get out there, if you're like me or like most other people, this is the predominant color. It's a deep cobalt blue with violet overtones. And what this is it's potential. It's potential energy even inside of here. So what Channeling said to do was get a crystal, I said, put your intention in that crystal. He says, because when you put that crystal inside here, you're actually encapsulating your whole universe. He said, your universe is in here, so what does that really mean? Typically, if you have some intention, you're dealing with a collective energy of the town, the city, everything that goes on around. And yes, you can get above that. I think that's why we aspire to move our vibratory level up to get above that. Whoops, sorry. I talked to the crystal or the microphone. So anyway, this isolates potential. So now we have isolated potential. What if I said, we know crystals, I know you pronounce this differently, piezoelectric, one or the other. This is a measurable thing that this crystal has. It's not something we imagine, it's not something we're asking for. So now all of a sudden, you have what's called an igniter, and Tesla gave me that information. I just started channeling Tesla last week, but he said you've got a few problems in the things you're doing, but I'll help you out. Cool. So anyway, what would you think would happen if you took this crystal, and let's just say you were doing a healing on somebody, and you wanted to really generate some energy and some good intent and stuff. What if you held this for like 10 or 15 minutes and put all of that intention inside of this crystal? And what if you took a piece of paper and put it around the outside of this and had your intention written on that paper? And what if you put that paper, whoops, let me get rid of Rehkop. So now we have a crystal, we have a paper wrapped around it with a lot of our intention and our emotions and our desires within that. Oh, that light's bright. So now we put this in here, and they said, you also, did you bring any small wheels or any Metatron wheels? Anyway, so now we have our intention in isolated potential.
You want me to get a Metatron wheel?
No, that's okay. You take one of those, which we have in small sizes, and put it underneath your, this pretty much completes the process. At first we used a mirror underneath it also to reflect everything up and into the potential. But Cameron said, it was actually Tesla said, that's really not totally necessary. He said, if you put your intention in that potential and do believe that it's possible that miracles do happen, just track it. You know, it's like a lot of times I've been told these things and they'll tell me, okay, you're working on something in the world and you put it inside of a generator. We typically have about 6 of these going at a time. Track it, you know, look at it next week or the week after. Is it changing? Has anything changed? And it was like almost every single time. So I can't tell you how profoundly this little simple device of a glass and a crystal can be turned into a magic healing device. Yes?
Do you need to clear it afterwards to reset it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're done with your intention and things like that, you can clear it several ways. I like full moon clearings, water and salt, obviously, and just pure intention actually is pretty strong to go through. So we started tracking some of the things that were going on with, this is called a crystalline generator. And it's amazing if you, even when you know, say like you had one at home, and you can get your own, you know, you don't have to have ours. I mean, if you can find something, look for the violet overtones, super important, because that's what you'll see out there in the universe. But you can get your own crystal, you can get that. You can pick up a little Metatron's wheel from us, and you're all set. You have a crystalline generator at your own disposal. This one was probably the most, I'm assuming, one of the most visited pyramids, one that people were the most familiar with, so it seemed like an automatic that we would want to start with this one. So we did that. This one actually started higher. It started up in the high 70s, and now it's up in the high 90s. So because of its popularity around the world, I guess it was one of the easier ones. Gentleman said there's 4 master pyramids, and I said, well, what would make that different than any other pyramid? And they said once a master pyramid has reached full realization, or in other words, close to 100%, it will radiate so much light out of the vortices and the top that will actually start to affect other pyramids. I think most of you have probably heard of the resonance phenomenon. Like if you go into a clock shop, all the clocks seemingly are on the same beat. If you put another clock in there, it only takes a matter of time where it will also be on the same beat. So with humans, I think we call it the 120 theory, where we learn things that happen across the ocean or communicating about that. With the pyramids, once we get the master pyramids in the upper 90s, they'll start resonating, and I'll be able to pick up information. Like I think this number gets tossed around a lot, but they seem to think there's about 14,000 footers in Colorado. My intention is to light all those pyramids up, and however many people it takes to accomplish that. If we can accomplish that, the state of Colorado will be putting so much light into the collector, or all it is, it will have to change. A little bit about light. You know, why would we want to create light? First, we have to get past judgment. We can't have a perception that that is terrible, that's ugly, that's bad. I'm going to put as much light in there as I can, because you kind of already defeated your purpose in that process. But if you just create pure light, white light seems to work really well. And with your own intention, with your own desire, bring that to a specific location. And I'm asking you know, if you decide to do anything with the pyramids with this, that you bring it to a specific pyramid. Linda keeps track of who's working on which pyramids, and which pyramids still need help, because there's still, if they don't have human support, if they don't have our emotions, our heart, pushing that energy into them, they have a tendency to become dormant. And some of the pyramids that we're working on have been dormant for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So it's about time that we use one of the tools that God gave us. And the mother needs this as much or more than anybody, because every ounce of light you create that goes up goes into the collective of the consciousness. And what, I want to go over this real quickly, because it took me a while to learn it. What light does, it has the possibility. Let's just say, for instance, I sent, we'll take Elizabeth, she's right here close. Let's just say she had a headache, and without any perception, I just decided to send light to her. Well, how she used that light, or how that light became available, is where it gets a little tricky. And the reason that I say that is when light presents itself, whoops, it's usually at a higher level than what we're kind of aware of. And if you notice, when you have a decision to make, a tough decision, you'll typically go up in your consciousness, up in your vibratory level to make that decision. Well, if there's more light there, you're going to make a decision that is more supportive to light and creation, and so it becomes a very magical process. But what I wanted to reiterate is, in our pyramid work around the world, we never have a perception of what's right or wrong. We have a perception that if we create enough light, heaven on earth will be the end result of that process. However that looks, doesn't really matter. I know a lot of things happen. Right now we seem to be in a very challenging time, but we don't want it to be challenging particularly, but our world as we know it is slowly changing. I don't think our world will be exactly the same 6 months from now than it is right this moment. But the thing is don't get lost in the changes, get lost in what's coming. If you can visualize heaven on earth in your mind's eye, then visualize it and know everything you witness, even if it's distressing to you, has something to do with heaven on earth becoming a reality. So I found that it's very important to stay out of judgment, and this is healings, this goes in violent crimes, it goes on and on and on. Stay out of judgment, observe, take what you can as far as a lesson, because there's lessons in everything, especially those things that we as individuals have to go through. And some of those lessons are very painful, but it's how we hold those in context of whether or not they are harmful to us. I think some of Jacob's visuals that he had up here really showed that process quite well. If you're going through something that's, let's just say, adverse, excuse me, adversarial to you, and your emotions are crashing, and you're spending your time crying and going, why me? Why is this happening? You know, what's going on here? Just think if you just changed that process and said, I know what's going on here is a challenge, but I will meet that challenge and I will move through that challenge. One of our good friends, he was an Episcopalian priest, and one of our journeys up to Shambhala, which is 13,000 feet up in the Colorado mountains, he started talking about transparency, and his name was John, and I said, John, I heard you heard that word transparency. What does that mean exactly? And he said, when something comes toward you, Rakie, in the form of an energy, some energetic form, just pretend even, you know, build it in your mind's eye that you're transparent and let it flow through you. And I said, oh, it doesn't sound that hard. He says, well, what typically happens is people will have an experience, and this is just one typical example. Obviously, there's a million things that could happen, but a bad experience earlier in a life, and something comes along that has the same symptoms, that's presenting the same facts, and you feel yourself just crashing inside because you literally start feeling those same emotions once again. So I said, well, how can you avoid that? What causes that? And he said, well, just pretend that experience is a piece of Velcro. And let's just pretend that event that is challenging you is another piece of Velcro, a piece that sticks. You know, as you let that go through you, if there's Velcro, it sticks. So guess what? You get to experience emotions all over again. So you get another try at, can I learn this lesson? Can I be transparent? During my life, I went through many tragedies as an abandoned child, but it took a long time before those tragedies didn't control my life. It was like the first thing that I talked about was, you know, who'd been killed, who died of violent crimes, on and on and on. And I found out through channeling help. They said, what did you learn out of that particular experience? And I said, I don't think I learned anything. It almost killed me. I ended up in a mental works. I thought I was so suicidal. I said, but you learned something out of it. And there's something still coming to you on account of that. And I said, I can't imagine what that might be. I'm going to share one real quickly. And please, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I've got enough sympathy my whole life. But my fiance was raped and murdered in a holdup in our restaurant. So we lost everything, including her. I couldn't come up with any rational reason why something like this, so terrible as this could happen. And when they gave me this last communication that I just shared with you, I said, nothing good came out of that. I said, she was the most wonderful person in the world, the most giving person I'd ever known. To have her brutally raped and murdered, shot in the back. I said, you're telling me something good came out of that? And they said, just wait, Rakie, just wait. So I waited and I waited and I waited. About 6 months later, when I was past the worst part of the trauma, my family was taken away from me when I was very young. My sister found me through a detective because my mother had just been murdered. So her husband hired me to work for them so we could be a family again. So I'm just trying to make that as short as possible. So I have to fly back and forth to Southern California from Northern California like 2 or 3 times a week. So the very first flight that I get on, I'm excited about my new job. I still haven't got past the grieving process of losing my fiance, but I noticed all this commotion. I had a window seat in the very front row, and I noticed all this commotion outside, and they were wheeling a woman up in a wheelchair. She was totally distraught. She was crying. She couldn't even get up out of the wheelchair. 2 of the attendants picked her up by the arms, brought her in, and the seat next to me was vacant. And they sat her right next to me. And I waited for her to calm down a little bit. And I said, is there anything I can do or say to help you? I didn't know what had happened. And she shared with me, she said, my husband was just killed in a holdup. And I'm going to pick up his body right now. So I shared with her what I went through and how I got through it. And by the time we got to the destination, she was able to walk off the plane without even crying. And then I said, thank you, Father. I said, now I do understand what I did go through, help somebody else. Well, that's happened multiple times. I lost a child earlier in my life, and I can't tell you how many people have found their way to me that have lost children. If you're trying to counsel someone who's lost a child, it really helps when you can say, I know how you feel, because most people haven't been there. It's one of the most painful things you'll ever go through. So anyway, every lesson, I forgot about the pyramids.
We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go through this quickly.
You can go later,
This is
Linda.
Mount Kailash in China, Tibet. Probably one of the most worshipped sacred sites on the face of the planet. So, okay. Another master pyramid, El Mirador. And this one is huge. It's one of the biggest around. Another master pyramid. So if you're looking for one to choose to work on, starting with the master pyramids works really well because it helps us. Once they get online, then the other ones can start following.
This is the 4th one.
Okay.
You can see that.
Okay, we were talking about this earlier. See the light coming out of the top of the Bosnian pyramid? Can you see it on that thing?
Yeah.
This is one of, I would say, the most observed master pyramids. It's probably had more magical things happen than a lot of others. But definitely another master pyramid. Go ahead. Okay, how do you pronounce that word? This province, this province pyramid, I got the little one, is in China. China has, nobody can guess because for some reason they just determined that they needed to cover up all the pyramids, so they actually planted them, put dirt on them. People are saying, maybe Dr. Bob could help me with this, but they say there's at least 200 or 300 pyramids in China alone. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know if there's that many, but
Because I know you've been to most of them.
well,
Only underwater.
The Pyramid of Sensei, the biggest one they found out about from World War II pilots flying over there trying to attack the Japanese. That's why we even know about it. That's how much of a secret it was.
This one's one of my favorite. This one's underwater. We actually had 2 underwater pyramids. One of them, unfortunately, was destroyed. Talon said it was destroyed by a sonar device developed by the Navy as a weapon to destroy other ships. So they practiced on, there was a pyramid called El Capitan off the coast of Chile in South America. It's no longer there. They were able to destroy it with their sonar things. Unfortunately, they kill our living whales and dolphins at the same time. I probably better not get into that subject. I'll get in trouble. Okay, the Teotihuacan. Did I say that right?
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan. This pyramid, where's Jacob? Didn't you go see this?
Yeah, I go see it.
You had some pretty amazing experiences there, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So, for some reason, this pyramid is a little harder to keep up. It's like we get it up into the 70s or 80s percentage of coherency, and then 2 days later, I look at it and it's dropped down another 20 or 30 points. So anybody that feels an inclination to work on this pyramid in Mexico, it does need a lot of work. I don't know if it's because of the poverty and the general mentality that exists in these areas. It has a tendency to bring it down a little bit. That's only a guess. But I do know when it's illuminated, it's super powerful, super strong. Okay, this is the Zerg pyramid in Iran. This is one of the biggest pyramids to my knowledge. We have a very good friend who's from Iran, and he works on this constantly. One of the nicest people you ever meet in your lifetime. Too bad we have to be at odds with this country to some degree.
So on the
This is what it
left,
looks like now, and this is what it looked like had it not
Okay.
gone to ruins.
Yeah, once a pyramid's established, even though it's starting to deteriorate and go away, the energies that it held are still available. The work that you can still do can still happen. I don't think I covered this briefly, but the pyramids, what they showed me in channeling is, they said this is what a pyramid looks like energetically, and there was like this beautiful white light that went around the whole base. It went up the vertices, which are the corners, and out the top, which is like that picture that you just saw. They said if you could see these after you do that work, you would realize how important the work is and how world-changing this can be. Okay, you want to switch to moon? This is Antarctica. I don't know, a lot of you probably have some exposure to things that have gone on in Antarctica, but apparently it's a lot. But there's a pyramid there, there's been a pyramid there. This is actually one of the easier ones to work with, but it's also part of the North Pole process. In other words, the 2 poles like to connect. They like the energy. There's enough energy coming from each place that they can actually connect and form
And this
a
is not a
pyramid.
pyramid. This is the vortex where you spin the quadrupede over this imaginary thing in order to balance the polarities in the world.
Oh, this is Alaska. It's a strange light anomaly on the one picture that you can see from there also. Okay. Oh, 4 corners, no visible pyramid there, but channeling it said there is a pyramid there underground that was covered up with sand hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and it still holds that energy, so it brings and coalesces the energy of the 4 states that come together at 4 corners, and this is a very powerful area. So even though there's not a physical pyramid there, we spin a quadrupede like that over this area, and it's just amazing. It's one of the easier ones to keep up at a higher level. Okay, here's a picture of all the pyramids together. So I would encourage if any of you can dedicate a minute or two a day to work on the pyramids, to let Linda know what you're working on, and she'll make sure you're in the loop to get the information back of what the coherency rate of that pyramid is going. So
we just have a couple of seconds, and I wanted to emphasize what Rakie was saying about light. One of the favorite sayings that I have heard his Metatron council channel through him: as you go, so goes the Mother Earth. As the Mother goes, so go the universe. So I want to thank you all for showing up at this particular time, because we're going to watch the transition from a heart, from the ego-centered world, greed, control, into the heart-centered coherency. And light makes all the difference. The other one that Rakie has channeled that is one of my favorites is with enough light. And this is what your pyramids will provide into the entire world, because as these light up, so will all of the pyramids. And then we will be able to light up the mountains. With enough light, there isn't one person on the planet that wouldn't begin to make decisions in support of greater and greater benevolence. So there is nobody we need to chastise as, you know, you don't belong, because they just don't have enough light. Rakie was given the metaphor: if you're on a mountaintop and it's dark, you will take a misstep and you'll fall off. But with enough light, everybody makes the right decision. So there's people whose hearts have turned cold, who the opposite of love is fear. But what they fear is that there's no more love, that they have lost love. They've lost admiration, self-esteem, self-respect, and so they look for external ways rather than inside-out ways. So this is an inside-out process that we're in right now. And I just wanted you to know that another quote is, "It's through the heart of compassion that the world will fall in love." So how do we hold compassion for these people that we think are our opposition? Well, it's like if you have a child in front of you that's terrorized, what are you going to do? Are you going to chastise that little child? No, they're just in fear. They're in fear, so the best thing we can do, they said to Rakie's channel, is our best chance to increase the coherency of light in the world is to use these pyramids, and these 12 will ignite the rest, and then that will ignite the coherency levels in the world. There's one more slide, and then we're done. How to sparkle in perceived adversity. We do see these transition years are going to be hard to watch. We haven't gone through anything like this. So these are things that they've been telling us over and over again. Get permission from your unseen support team. They are there no matter what you face. Embrace it. Do not fear it. You know, this is, your support team needs permission. We are in a free will zone, and that's why we're so valuable. They don't want a robotic universe of creators. They want us to have the character and the conviction to get through this stuff. It only grows our heart bigger. Whatever we see in front of us is only designed so that we can have as hearts as big as the universe. Use the whole toolkit. Use these things. Use your compassion. Use your understanding. Use your meditation. Your sacred ceremonies. And but you know, most of all, use your transparency. Whatever comes in front of us, because we have each other, we've all come at this point in a mission to bring the Earth and the planet through an ascension process that is going to be startling for the entire cosmic structure. Eventually the Colorado Fork Troopers. Okay, I think we've covered this, how to send light, take care of yourselves, your home, each other. I think we said that one. And no, you are never lost. Here's another quote. All will find their way to the light. Even if it takes them the million-year process of going through ostracism from the earth. The earth is the place where we shall inherit. and it's not for the people that have grown cold hearts of control. So, but eventually they too will find the light. It may take a long, long time. Thank you for all you do.